Welcome to the Press One for Nick podcast. My name is Nick Lobenthal, and today I have the honor of hosting a global recognized pioneer, keynote speaker, and expert in experience management and design, and most importantly, a friend. With a wealth of expertise, Lou Carbone has the forefront of revolution of how businesses connect with their customers on a profound level. As the founder and CEO of Experience Engineering, he introduced the groundbreaking concept of emotional and unconscious clue-based experience design and total experience management. And recently appointed as a professor of practice at the Broad College of Business at Michigan State University, Lou teaches in the first ever Master of Science degree in customer experience management program in the country, which is awesome. Throughout this episode, we're going to dig into the essence of customer experiences, exploring the significance of emotional preferences, personalized interactions, and the art of crafting unforgettable moments that leave a lasting impression. Lou, welcome to the Press One for Nick podcast.
Nick, my friend, and I admire what you're doing and advancing this space. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you so very, very much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. And I think we can continue to have conversations on and off record, but we go pretty deep into not just experience, but life. And for that, I appreciate. So the question I have for you to start is, for the people that don't know who you are, maybe give them a little bit of background and journey into becoming that, what is the pioneer of experience management and design?
Nick, I started out as a journalist, actually before yellow journalism. I was more around investigative reporting. And I started out as a reporter in a small town, then went to work for United Press. From there, I ended up becoming an advertising executive, worked for a number of ad agencies, and then became the vice president of marketing at National Car Rental and Emerald Isle and all of the innovations at National took place that were really breakthrough in terms of counter bypass, et cetera, and left National to really start taking what I had been doing over the years, working at various agencies, working with the influence that I had with an interview that I did with the last Imagineer hired by Walt Disney, a gentleman named George McGinnis, who recently passed away. And it was in that interview that I began to become fascinated by the idea of it's how we cause customers to feel about themselves, which in turn is how they feel about the experience. And George had created 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The People Movers, one of the most remarkable interviews. And it was on the day before he was getting married, and changed my perspective forever in terms of formative thinking in this space on simple things that Disney did that were just knowing what time a car was parked, so that if you couldn't remember where you parked, they asked you what time you parked, and they had a log of where the lots were open. And I'm like, this is absolutely brilliant. No technology, but brilliant. And that was sort of my introduction to experience management. And then later in life, it became my calling, very much due to Stephen Heckel, co-author in the first article that was written in this space. We actually did a working paper back many, many years ago for the Marketing Science Institute. Then I've been blessed with people that I have such gratitude in terms of my evolution and learning, like Len Berry at Texas A&M, Jerry Zaltman, the late Chuck Cleveland, who was a linguist, Kathy Latour, who really is an expert in memory reconstruction. And I've been blessed with really, and so grateful for the connections that have been made in the path that somehow has been laid out for me to see experience management in the way that I do.
And I think the way that you see experience management is different than most. As I know that you originated the concept of emotional unconscious clue-based experience designs and total experience management. And that is not normal when people think of customer experience or employee experience. So maybe could you explain what these concepts and how they contribute to creating that exceptional experience that you've kind of dove into head first?
Absolutely. The great experience of working with Charles Altman at the Lab of the Consumer Mind at the Harvard Business School when Jerry first started probing unconscious thought. We had developed scenarios that we had created and actually did PET scans of people buying automobiles, very invasive market research. Hard to get people to be recruited, a lot of students involved in that study. But what we looked at was parts of the brain that were ignited in that dialogue of what that experience is like. And the closest thing to buying an automobile was being hunted and chased. And then Jerry's work evolved into understanding how do we begin to understand those constructs? And it led to the development of deep metaphor elicitation and a tool and a technique that allows you to understand basically somewhere around 19 to 20 basic frameworks that are in the limbic pathways of our brain. We actually make a decision emotionally in this primitive part of our brain before we create the intellectual alibi or the rationale. And it's based on emotional feelings that need to be fulfilled in terms of the way we view an experience. And that led to using that as a basis of all of our work. And if we think about the way that the mind works, what we really see is that we take in clues, sensory clues, all the time. Those clues actually shape our emotions, and that affects our attitude, and our attitude drives our behavior. This is a human factor. It happens whether it's a relationship between husband and wife. It's the essence of experience. And I think that what we do so often in the way that we look at customer experience is we forget that it's a human experience. We think it's a transactional experience, and how do we improve the transaction? And we'll bolt on experience. And what I refer to as bolt-on theory is we bolt a whole bunch of pieces and then we cross our fingers and manage by hoping. And there's a whole science to understanding unconscious thought, needs that people have that they can't even express. And when we talk about being customer-centric, in the world that we're moving to, it's being customer-driven versus customer-centric. How do we meet what customers need and desire that they don't even really fully understand? I mean, we've had people that have gone through this process talking about Skyline Chili in Cincinnati, which is a very cult chili, not known throughout the United States. We had people in tears talking about their emotions and their feelings as you begin to probe. Much of the market research that's done today is around management questions that people want answered. And so you end up priming people. The whole idea of following someone through the maze of their mind and understanding the mind of the customer, the voice of the customer is retroactive. The mind of the customer is proactive. And I think that we spend a lot of time in this space literally fixing broken things versus how do we create extraordinary value that is a magnet that brings people to that experience because of the way it causes them to feel about themselves.
So you said two words that really stuck out to me, and that was customer driven, not customer centric. In your words, what's the difference between those two?
The difference between being customer-centric is in many organizations, it's empty language, and it will always resort to not really understanding the customer. It's listening to the customer, it's voice of the customer, but I want to know how someone thinks versus what they think. And if I know how they think, I can create a much more engaging experience that creates advocacy, creates this deep emotional bond that is almost unseverable. I hate to say it, I just took a picture of all the empty boxes of Apple stuff that I bought over the years. I think I'm going to post it on LinkedIn. I couldn't believe that there are probably 62 boxes. And why do I even save the boxes? I'm saving trash. It's that memory, that emotional bond that I've got these things, and I've been making excuses for years why I keep the boxes when I talk to my wife. And I say, I might have to send something back. And she'll say, they won't know what a Newton is if you sent it back to them. But it's that emotion of opening a Newton for the first time. Those are things that you cannot put in a retroactive look at how do I fix broken things. Those are built into emotional design and the clues that are built into that.
Yeah, I want to talk about clues here next, but why are you saving Apple boxes versus all these Amazon boxes that you probably get weekly, if not more?
They created an experience in a box. It's an experience in a box that is tied to what I call an experience motif that reinforces that sense of being different. And I mean, I hate to say this, it's almost orgasmic opening an Apple package. It's peeling all the pieces. It's so well thought out. It's done for me to make it easy for me. And it creates a memory. And what we've done is a lot of studies on memory reconstruction, Kathy Latour and I, over the years, and understanding imprinting and how we imprint an experience is the repetitive nature of an emotional motif. What are the emotions someone desires feeling, and how do we build clues that resonate with that consistently?
So you've touched on clues a few times. So clues are the building blocks of that total experience.
Yes.
And those clues, excuse me, create emotions, right? That focus on that total experience. So what are some of those sensory clues that people can focus on? And then do they have the ability to change those clues over time?
Absolutely. What we've developed are tools like clue scanning, and they're built around a system that clues break down into functional clues, humanic clues, and mechanic clues. And that rigorous system of being able to look at an experience through those filters, and then the sensory aspects in terms of how are we impacting that with the six senses. Sorry, I left one out. But what becomes so powerful is if I begin to design an experience, knowing that the atomic structure, it's like little Lego blocks, and the emotional connection is what Lego calls connection power. It's the power that each one of those blocks is engineered to fit. And if we know what the emotions are unconsciously that someone desires feeling about themselves in an experience, and embed those clues in the experience, you create a much deeper emotional bond. So often organizations and it's the atomic structure. So if you think of them as Lego blocks, and the experience motif is that little platform that you build everything on, to create something of meaning and something that can be interpreted and felt. It's fun to have Lego as a client. We actually did training for them using Lego as a tool in their whole education process, whereas they had had a retail process that was very traditional. We said it should be built on play, and developed a whole program where the actual training program is done in Lego blocks. I really believe that what they call clutching power is engineered. So what we need to do is understand the emotional clutching power in clues, and then align those to create something that holds together. Nick, this came out of working actually with a group of executives years ago at IBM, when I had 15 executives in the room and asked each of them what they wanted me to feel as a customer. And each one of them, except for two, had the same answer. And most of them didn't even understand that it was emotional. It was like they were the leaders in the world. It was about them. It wasn't about the customer. And I think that that's when I say it needs to be customer driven. It's moving from the industrial age, which is a product push, to a push from understanding how customers think and what their even unarticulated needs and desires are, and how we meet those and adapt our companies to providing those experiences that meet those needs. It's a pull strategy versus a push strategy.
Yeah, I like that mindset as well. One story that I had from Lego, and maybe you were part of this, is I went to a conference, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, and they were talking about the inside customer service. They had these building blocks, which happened to be Legos, and there were 5 different steps of, maybe it was 4 or 5 different steps, and the acronym was fun, reliable, knowledgeable, and expertise. And the acronym is freaky. And so they had fun with it. And they said, you know, how freaky were you on that call? Did you freak that call? And they're like, oh, we got all sorts of freaky. So they had fun on that journey, which is part of their acronym. But they also got to show inside those building blocks where they were on that journey. I mean, obviously you can't say if a kid swallows a Lego, which it can be processed, but that you want to be fun in that, but you want to have knowledge and expertise in that, and maybe provide a little empathy. But
Absolutely.
it's interesting, you kind of go through that journey as companies. You said with IBM, they were focused, except for 2 of them had different stories of what that customer should feel. Instead of focusing on the customer, they were focusing on themselves. So how can companies effectively discover and understand those emotional preferences to create a more meaningful connection with their customers?
Yeah, that it's literally adopting different ways of looking at qualitative research. It's understanding how we inventory clues, which is what clue scanning is all about. What are the clues and signals that work toward the motif, that are highly distinctive and differentiated? What are clues and signals that are negative? Eliminate the negative, move those neutral clues up into an area of preference. And then how do I design preferential distinctive clues that create that emotional bond in this, what we call an experience motif, which is an emotional end frame. I now hear a lot of people talking about it as a North Star. They're picking up on our construct. We've always talked about the motif being a North Star. And I'm hearing more and more of that dialogue. I'm excited to hear a lot of the dialogue even reconstituted in some ways in the space, because I feel that the space is evolving toward the world that I've lived in from when I actually basically became an experienced engineer.
It's interesting, the conversations that we've had off camera of where you've gone and how long it's taken everybody else to catch up around that experience management. The question I have is, there's a lot of organizations, not just experience management software developers or whatever that looks like, but there's a lot of organizations that are kind of stuck in that status quo. They're frozen in the moment. And but I'd love to get your perspective when it comes to experience management, or just in general. Why are so many organizations kind of stuck in that spot?
I call it the wine list, and that is not the liquor, but whining. There's a whole lot of whining that goes on in the industry. And many people in the space feel unfulfilled, unheard. I probably created the first customer experience officer title when I created experience engineering. I was the chief experience officer. I believe that the CEO in an organization is the chief experience officer. And I think that what ended up happening is the evolution of customer sat and quality began to move through the lower levels of an organization. And then all of a sudden, CEO said, oh, we need that department, and relegated it to a department. The message that Stephen Hackle, my co-author, and unbelievable, I would never be in this space if it wasn't for Steve, insisting that I write about what I was doing. I thought I was just having fun. And what I think is so amazing is that we need to educate senior leadership in an organization, because I think they're stuck in a rut, and therefore the organizations are stuck in a rut. And what you have is a lot of whining going on versus the opportunity, the real opportunity to actually accelerate strategies in organizations and get true results that make a difference and cause the organization culturally through a stealth transformational process, because transformation is always difficult for an organization. Use the word transformation, whoop, all of a sudden antennas go up. But by adopting a strategy that's distinctive and unique, you can actually impact the culture of an organization to transform itself into being customer driven.
Yeah, what I also see, and maybe we're gonna ruffle a little feathers here, so why not? But is there's a lot of CX professionals that don't necessarily have that buy-in from the leadership, and maybe it has to do with the CX professional who's not doing a great job of aligning it with business outcomes. Maybe it's the organization not putting the value back on the customer experience or to be customer driven. But where do you see the biggest gap when it comes to people that are having a experience management or customer experience focus? They now have a person or they now have a department, but they're not driving those results.
Nick, the problem, I believe, is that the industry is so fragmented. And that's a result of social media. And it's a result of, I love the companies, Medallia and Qualtrics, but having massive budgets. And there is such fragmentation in the industry that if you look at the quality movement that was led by Deming and others, it became a cohesive way of looking at things. The fragmentation of knowledge and people hanging shingles and people going into positions are going in there's just hardly any common platforms. And even the common platforms are built off of older thinking, industrial age thinking, process management, process improvement, with another label put on it called customer experience. We're living in a new world, and that new world really requires adopting an open mind and looking at the future, because we are living in a very different world. So this fragmentation within the industry of, when I did work with Prodigy years ago, which was an online deal before Google, so you couldn't Google customer experience back then. But if you Google customer experience today, it's mind-boggling in terms of the number of posts, the number of people, the number of approaches. And what it's led to is fragmentation and an ego-driven, I've got my process. And what we haven't been able to do is elevate that process to new knowledge, new understanding, innovation, and open-mindedness. And unfortunately, as a journalist, I was always open to discovery and curiosity. And that's what has led my work over the years. I just find that it's very difficult in today's environment with this fragmentation, even with the number of organizations now. That's why I'm so excited about the master's program at Michigan State. I get to teach new thinking, breakthrough thinking on unconscious thought, while still teaching what is basically best practices today. But I get to talk about next practices. And I think that next practices is where we need to move to versus what best practices are today.
I think you've always been on the forefront for decades of experience management and design. And you talk about the next practices versus best practices, which I love. As you look forward, what trends do you see in that experience management design, and how do you believe businesses should adapt to these changes to stay competitive?
It's actually shifting this. We talk about thinking customer back, but we're only using voice of the customer. And what we need to do is get into the mind of the customer, understand how they think versus what they think. I think that's so, so different. And you begin to look at, tools that are being developed that are just starting to appear, but we've been doing things much deeper than sentiment. I mean, we've actually worked at mind mapping on how someone looks at an experience. The research tools that I'm teaching in qualitative research talk about multiple tools being used that go all the way from psychology to art therapy. It's how you get people crying about Skyline chili to understand how they think about it. I could ask them, is it warm? Is it hot? Is it served cold? But when I understand the emotional bond to that, and that there's a special way to cut Skyline chili, I'm like, wow, this is powerful. And it's about connection. That's the deep metaphor that is underneath all of that, is this sense of connection to the rituals that are part of Skyline chili.
So what are the powers of the questions that you actually ask when you are having conversations with people that are not just fans, but fanatics of organizations like Skyline Chili, to create that emotional response of crying in front of a complete stranger?
Yeah, it's basically probing. It is never, it's continuing to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and follow them where they go. You see, when people will do focus groups, there are discussion guides that are basically management questions that they want answered. In these interviews that are one-on-one that Jerry Zaltman and his team actually pioneered at the Harvard Business School, and I was fortunate enough to participate in, and the influence that Jerry's had on my life is unshakable. It's part of my everyday thinking. And it's literally asking more questions. And if someone brings something up, you probe and you follow them through the maze of their mind rather than what I want to know. And what you're looking for, and what I taught in this class, and folks were like, just, wow, that's so unbelievable. The purpose of research is not to discover stuff for me as the interviewer, but to have the person I'm interviewing discover things that they didn't even know they felt.
Is there times where a customer will say something but not actually believe it?
Not actually believe it?
Yeah, emotionally, at the emotional level, if they're saying, man, for an example, let's say that I'm doing a quick pickup and I'm doing a drive-up pickup at Walmart or a Kroger or something, and an organization is asking the question, do you prefer immediate response as soon as you drive in, that somebody comes up because they see your driver's license or your license plate, or and maybe have one or two products wrong in your cart, or would you rather have them be 1 or 2 minutes where you wait in line and have 100% of that product be right? Maybe there's what my thought is there some times where somebody says, well, I want it immediately and I want it right. But at the subconscious level, at the emotional level, they are, if you probe into that question and you start digging a little bit further, you would rather have it be a few minutes late and
Exactly.
and have it be 100% right, because you're making dinner for your in-laws and you want it to be perfect.
Exactly. Those are the types of things that you learn. For example, work that we did for Taco Bell and work that we did for McDonald's on drive-through. Almost, I think at one point, and it's probably higher now, but almost 60 to 70% of the business in some of those operations is drive-through. And there are little nuisances that no one ever points out, that there's a whole feeling of being oriented as you go through that process. There's a whole feeling of time being a resource. That's one of the reasons why you're there. And what we learned is even the choreography of how we operate through that window. You probably lived this. Everyone has at one time or another where the first thing they start asking for is the money, and all of a sudden, oh man, I've got to unbuckle my seatbelt. I've got to do this, and all of a sudden, the drink starts coming in. You're inundated by all of this stuff. At In-N-Out, they ask you whether you want to eat in the car, out of the car. You're making all these decisions, and it's how do I keep someone oriented in that experience? And even the choreography of how that's done. We also learned things that condiments, where people were timed, and it's the fusion of employee experience and customer experience. The employees were timed, so they would have these guns to shoot mayonnaise or this or that, and they'd drop them, they'd hit this, hit that, make a mistake because of the timer. And it was timing the employee. So understanding the connection between employee experience, what I call fusionomics is the era that we're entering into now, where we cannot separate these experiences. We cannot separate social media. We cannot separate digital. It's fusionomics. How do we create that emotional bond on a base level across all of these pieces so that they're consistent in creating that deeper emotional bond?
I could continue this conversation for another day, and maybe we shall. But Lou, what's the best way for my listeners to find you?
L Carbone at expeng.com is my email address, and always happy. Nick, the biggest thing is for me, and it's why I'm teaching at Michigan State. It isn't for money, it's for the fun. It's for helping people find a way to make a difference in the world, understanding the science and psychology of experience management and leveraging that to create a greater world.
Well, thank you, Lou, for making a difference in the world, and the value that you put on this podcast episode. I much appreciate.
Nick, thank you so very much. And I'm so excited about the work you're doing, and God bless you. You're on, we're all in this space. We all need to be champions. We need to be more unified, and we need to work as a whole, and we can make a difference in the world.
Thank you